Well, thank you very much for this invitation. It's really a very great honor, and I hope those of you that have to listen to me a couple of times won't get too bored. It was intriguing for me because you just listened to a German organ from Munich, and I'm a German woman from Munich, so you get it twice over. As you just heard, I've been asked to tell the story of how the Ottawa Charter came about, and maybe we'll have also time to say one or two challenges that perhaps got lost along the way and that we should rediscover, particularly as you work on a Trondheim statement, and maybe that will be helpful. I also, I guess, have to tell the real story because there are some people in the audience who were also there, and they would stand up straight away if I told something that hadn't happened, even though everyone has their own story. And that in itself is very interesting. The Ottawa Charter, that it came about, was a fact of a very great window of opportunity. And that window of opportunity opened up because there were a group of visionary, dare I say, men at the World Health Organization. And would you believe it, all three of them were Nordics. So my life has actually been defined by Nordic men, could you believe that? So the first one was Halfdan Mahler from Denmark, who was then the Director General of the World Health Organization, a tremendous visionary. Then I was working at the WHO Regional Office for Europe. The regional director at that point was Leo Caprio from Finland. And his second in command, then as we called it, Director of Program Management, was Joe Asval here from Norway. And they opened the door, they opened this window, they wanted change, and somehow I fell into that space, and I was asked to help bring about that change. There was a background to that and to their vision, and there were various elements of it. Halfdan Mahler was himself very contrarian. He was a revolutionary in his own right. He brought about the Alma Ata Declaration that has really defined a lot of international and global health work. And it was with the Alma Ata Declaration that the slogan of Health for All was created. That slogan was frequently misunderstood because some people said, well, you know, what is this health for all, everybody in the world jumping around being healthy and happy? That was not what he tried to express. He tried to express, first of all, that WHO was about health, not about disease and medicine, and that health was for everybody. It was the equity agenda that was critical to him. And that equity agenda, of course, remains with the World Health Organization to this day, and is perhaps even more important today than it was then. I don't think any of us in the 1980s believed that the world would be divided to the extent that it is today, and that many inequities also here in Europe are actually larger than they were then. We've lost a whole range of solidarities and securities that at that point in time seemed to us to be matter of fact, and where we thought they would get more rather than less and would be spread broadly around the world rather than less. There was also, particularly from Halfdan Mahler, a very great interest in social movements. And at that point in time, WHO had just discovered the women's health movement. And in the context of that, I was discovered because I was a women's health activist. And I was called in to actually write a study of women's health movements in Europe. But the minute I arrived to do that study, they said, you've got to do something else. What had happened was that WHO had a program on health education, and in the planning process of that program, it had been decided that WHO should develop what was called a social concept of health education. The person in charge of health education fell ill, and there was a big gap, but there was a deadline. And so this challenge had the word social in it. They looked around in the regional office, and they sort of found they had nobody with anything social in it. And I had appeared, and I was a political scientist and had been trained in sociology, and so they said, hey, you'll know how to write a social concept of health education. So originally I came for 3 months. I was there for 16 years, so that's what happens to you. So, but that interest in social movements remained, and also there was a willingness to really do something else and hire new types of people. And I remember sitting in the office with Joe Asval, and at one occasion when I had just been introduced to him, he said, well, I really look forward to meeting you. I've never seen a CV like that, because I had mentioned that I'd been a disc jockey. So he said, you know, in what way do you think being a disc jockey will allow you to do your job better? And so I told him, you know, when you're a disc jockey, you have to watch your audience. You have to get them to dance. And if you don't, you failed. So it teaches you about watching people and feeling atmospheres, and I think I convinced him. And then when they finally offered me a regular job, some of you know WHO and some consultancies go on forever, but they offered me a regular job, and then I was called in, and Joe sat there very seriously. And then he said, the organization has decided to take a risk with you. And so I thought, you know, I was the only social scientist around, and I was rather young for being hired in WHO, and I was female. And so I thought, no, I mean, I can't let him get away with this. And so I said, well, Joe, what tells you that I'm willing to take the risk with the organization? And actually, it had been an issue for me because I'd come out of the social movements. I was an academic. I did work at the university. But I was worried if I, joined this organization, I would lose my identity. And so it wasn't just said lightly. There was something there that I felt, are they going to smother me? Or is there something that I'll be able to affect change? So getting the opportunity to develop the Ottawa Charter was an important proof that actually at that point in time the organization was able to do that. So Alma Ata, Health for All, interest in social movements. There was also something else going on that Joe Asval brought to the organization, and that was the notion of health targets. The notion that you should set targets for health, that you could plan for health. You don't only plan hospital beds, you actually plan that you have a healthier population. And so around that time also, Joe Asval started the planning process for the European health targets, which were then adopted in 1985, I believe. A very difficult process, and I'm very happy they were adopted in 1985, because even 2-3 years later, with the social changes that happened, it would probably not have been possible. But this thinking around the health targets was very important at that point. One used the terminology of lifestyle and health, and there was a decision that there should be a section within that target document on lifestyle and health. And so I raised my hand straight away and said, yes, I should be responsible for that, because that's linked to a social concept of health education. And I actually did get that responsibility. And that was a very interesting process then, because basically it was a parallel and interactive process developing the work for the Ottawa Conference and the Ottawa Charter, and the work on the targets. And strangely enough, we had 5 targets on lifestyle and health, and you know or remember that there are 5 action areas of the Ottawa Charter. So that interface was also very important for the resources, because actually I must say probably hundreds of people were involved in that process of discussion, either what the targets should look like or what the Ottawa action areas should look like. But how did, so here we were doing these targets. How did the Ottawa process come about? Well, as part of this process, I had to present to the WHO Regional Committee a background paper, technical discussion paper on lifestyles. I added an S, lifestyles and health, because I said, if you want a social concept, you have to build it on sociology, and then you build it on Max Weber, and that is the notion of Lebensweisen. And that was the thinking behind it, and why the S became very, very important. That paper was discussed at a regional committee in Madrid, and Halfdan Mahler was there. And in order to speak, you had to go behind a big dark stage. And so I came back from speaking, and there stood Halfdan Mahler, our big boss. And then he said, I need to talk with you. And so he said, I'm going to come to Copenhagen to talk to you. I thought, my God, what have I done? And then I said, well, you've got to tell Joe. I said, you can't do anything without my boss. Anyhow, Halfdan Mahler came with his deputy, Joshua Cohen, and I was grilled. They did a good cop, bad cop thing. And then they said, we want you to run a global program, and we want you to take some of the notions that we've put, particularly the intersectorality thinking, the empowerment thinking, in the Alma Ata Declaration. We want you to develop something that will also make that palpable for the developed countries, because they are telling me we have primary health care, and they're not listening to any other dimensions. And also Mahler already had the vision saying these are the kind of problems that the developing world is going to have in 10, 20 years' time. And so I got to be responsible for a global program. We looked around who we could work with on this, and we did an evaluation and some travel to programs around the world that call themselves health promotion. And the one that was closest to our understanding was the one in Canada. And Canada then also agreed to be a partner in this process. That's why the conference came to be in Canada. We set a conditionality, and it's a conditionality we kept for all health promotion conferences, that we, WHO, would only come to the country, to Canada, if at the same time as we launched a major policy document, the country itself would launch a national policy. And so on occasion of the conference, Canada also launched a national health promotion policy. Interesting process, by the way, that was also negotiated with an intersectoral process, and the health minister, Jake Epp, told us that he actually got quite positive responses from all kinds of ministries except his own. And I think that's maybe something some of you can also still relate to. So we had about a 5-year preparation process towards what became the Ottawa Charter. The partnership with Canada, we also wanted to be symbolic, so it was not just with the government, it was also with the Canadian Public Health Association. So that signal that non-governmental organization is absolutely critical in the health promotion process. And also our invitation policy, it was a conference by invitation only, reflected this, and we had all kinds of people there, including representative of the Boston Women's Health Collective and the like. So it was a very atypical conference. So the preparation had been very, very interdisciplinary, and as I said, linked to the process of the targets, and it was very interesting because I would call people to come to these meetings, and first thing they would say, yeah, I'd call some philosopher or some economist or whatever, and they'd say, but I have nothing to do with health. And so I would say, well, maybe you haven't realized it, but you do. And so we were able to engage a whole range of atypical people in the process, and I think that was probably also part of the strength. In Ottawa itself, how did we get the results? Some people say, and I don't know if Bosse Petersen would agree, the reason we got such a good charter was because the weather was so bad. And this was obviously in November. Canada tends to be cold then. It was snowing. You couldn't get out of the hotel. And we had actually devised a very, very participatory process. During the day, the text would be worked and discussed and reworked and everything. We would then get the material. We would work through the night. And everyone would get the new version under their room door by the time they woke up. It's interesting to see the link to technology, because think back to the mid-1980s, this was when the word processor had been invented and made widely available. And actually one of our conditions to the Canadians was that they had to make, I think, 20 word processors available so that one could do all this rework. And it's been interesting, the next conference, as some of you might know, was in Adelaide. And one of the only reasons we could do that conference properly was because the fax machine was available. So just think of these things, how recent it actually is, but also what it made possible or not possible, because that participatory process was actually made possible also through that technology. And I think one of the reasons that the Charter became the popular document it was is that, I forget exactly how many people were in Ottawa, I think around 200, that each of them felt ownership of this document. They really felt, I have really written this thing. I can find this word. It wouldn't be there if I hadn't been there. And the Canadians had it printed straight away, so that before people left, after the airport was opened again with the snow, they had the document in their hand. And so those kind of things made a big difference. In terms of the background, one thing that many people don't know is there was a very important meeting about a year or so before the Ottawa conference where we brought together about 12 leading thinkers and had them develop concepts and principles of health promotion. It was a yellow document. We called it the taxi document. because the idea was, if you get this incredible opportunity to sit in a taxi with your minister, you can give him this document and he can, put it in here, probably a male minister. And so that's very much influenced the thinking when we were writing the Ottawa Charter, when we were drafting it. And it was also an important document. If you get a chance, look at it, because it's one of the few documents that at the end has a section that's called dilemmas. It actually says, what kind of conflict can you get into if you promote health? Health imperialism can be one of the things, making the healthy healthier and leaving others behind. So a number of those dilemmas were openly addressed. People have frequently asked about the theory of health promotion. I've said we had a whole range of theoretical influences, just for this audience to name some of them, from political science, sociology, philosophy, Anthony Giddens, Michel Foucault, Ivan Illich with his critique of medicine, Paulo Freire from education, and Aaron Antonovsky, Gregory Bateson, a whole range of influences that came together in a specific way. A mistake we probably made is that we never took the time to sit down and write a theory book, but we continued, to develop the field and health promotion. You know that more or less at the same time Healthy Cities was created, the health promoting schools programs came, we started the journal Health Promotion, many different things. I'm sure you know the content of the Ottawa Charter by heart, and actually one of the jokes was, if you were woken up in the middle of the morning, middle of the night, you'd have to be able to say straight away what were its key components. Just to remind you, very important to us, not everyone reads the whole charter. People get hung up on those 5 action areas. But I'd really recommend to you, read the whole thing. First of all, because the beginning speaks about the prerequisites for health, which today we frequently call the social determinants. It says, how do you need to approach this area, this process of empowerment? And so the 3 important words were to enable, to mediate, and to advocate. The 5 action areas we saw as being integral, as belonging together. But what's really important also is the last part. There's a pledge there by the participants. And if you take that pledge, you can see that it's actually exactly the same challenges that we still face today. Ecological challenges. The Charter was the first WHO document to actually pick up the issue of ecology and sustainability. Another Nordic influence, Gro Harlem Brundtland's Our Common Future, had been published shortly before the conference. So all those things very much came together. But what was probably 3 revolutionary things that were very important was, 1, to say health is created in the context of everyday life. And we got a bit poetic and we said where people live, love, work and play. And if you think of the fact, just the love bit, that was the time when HIV/AIDS hit the world. So those kind of things started to get another dimension, and today you'd probably add a couple of other things, where you Google, where you shop, where you travel, those kind of things, because a lot of our environments have become more virtual. The other important thing is that with Marla's full support, we were able to play a bit with the definition of health. And we said clearly, health is a resource for everyday living. It is not the objective of life. And there are other priorities in our life. And maybe freedom is one of them. We set different priorities and we make trade-offs. And we felt it was very important to express that. And this whole notion of assets is actually there in a nucleus. And then, of course, that health promotion is a process, that it's not like the WHO Constitution says that health is a state. We felt, no, this is not about being a state. It's an ongoing process as we change, as our environment, as our context changes, so does the process of health promotion. Now, for us, and perhaps looking back, it's becoming even clearer than then. This was, I believe, one of the first documents that really tried to deal with the issue of health and modernity. And it obviously didn't use these words because they wouldn't have gone down well with health people. But it was about, how do you deal with health in a modern society towards the end of the 20th century. And a number of people, including myself, have used the terms of the public health revolutions and have said that probably, the Ottawa Charter is the third big public health revolution that takes a different approach. And that's why, and that's also something many people forget, is the Ottawa Charter has a critical subtitle, which says, towards a new public health. We wanted to integrate ourselves into the public health family. We saw ourselves as building on the inheritance of the very political and very intersectoral public health of the 19th century. We saw that health would change if there are political movements for health, if there are laws, if the state fulfills its obligations towards its citizens, and if the citizens push the state to fulfill these obligations. And we saw that much of our progress in health in our part of the world was due to that, was due to politicians. Virchow was a politician. He was in parliament in Berlin. He didn't only do his hospital work. And we felt that political dimension to be absolutely critical, and that people dimension. And as I said yesterday, look at the logo of the Ottawa Charter. The wave that crosses through the circle of healthy public policy is the wave that says community action and personal skills. It's people as social actors. And that was also so important for us. Yes, there is an environment. Yes, there are determinants of health. But let us not be deterministic. Let us recognize that people can and must shape their own destiny, and that this applies to health as much as to other things, and that health itself has been part of many political revolutions. So that tradition of public health was absolutely critical to us, and we saw that combination between perhaps, a traditional notion of the political coming together with the notion of politics that came out of the social movements, and actually learning from the women's health movement how personal health can be a very, very political thing. And that as you discover things about yourself and about your body, it suddenly shows you certain power relationships. And that, of course, then was reflected in the AIDS movement, was reflected in the disability movements, and is reflected today in movements that widen our notion of gender and say, the world's not divided in just two, male and women. There's a lot of things in between. And we have a right. And this notion of health as a right, and my identity as a right, and therefore that there's not only one definition of health, but there is my definition of health, and my definition of how I want to live is very, very critical, and that has come out of the movements. To look both back and forward, it's astounding to think, my God, sometimes it seems like yesterday, and this is nearly 30 years. And some things have remained the same. Some of the challenges we face in health promotion have definitely remained the same. But much has changed, and in that period, the health promotion has grown. But we've always had this conflict about what it is. Is it a discipline? Is it an approach? Is it a movement? And I belong to that school of thought that I think in that process of 30 years, health promotion has lost some of this political and some of this social edge. And even the fact that today we speak a lot about health in all policies, it's something we'll do tomorrow, I think also the notion of health in all policies is understood not as deeply political, but actually as a technocratic health approach. And there I think we need to think again. So what would make health promotion as the new public health truly political today? How does it gain political influence is one of the challenges that we face. There are some elements of that, and I'd just like to end with those. One is, of course, the debate around the social determinants of health, which has put equity on the agenda again, also in a very political way, but again, for me, sometimes a bit too deterministic. For me, always the fact that people can act is a very critical one, and some parts of the equity debate don't quite reflect that. I've spoken about the health in all policies. There's an incredibly political agenda around the NCDs, and I believe health promotion should be speaking about the NCDs in a different way, because the NCDs are about unsustainable production and consumption. That's what NCDs are about. They're about the commercialization of our life, what we call, now the commercial determinants of health. They are what some people call profit-driven diseases. And it's that political component of something that, sounds relatively, well, it's a disease and we don't like disease-based approaches and whatnot. I think we should start using some other terminology here and actually show the extent to which this whole notion of commercialization and promoting consumption at the expense of health and well-being has actually structured our lives. And I must say, in Ottawa, we would never have thought that this would happen to the extent that it has happened. Of course, also, we are much more challenged today to look at global issues. And again, here, a fantastic contribution has come from the Nordic countries. Just early this year, a new Lancet report was launched from Oslo University on the political determinants of health. And it shows, particularly at the global level, how trade, how migration, how investment policies, etc., structure our lives and our health. And I believe it's right there that health promotion needs to be to take issues forward. And that is also why people have said, as important as the development of the social determinants has been, too many things have been clustered into one term. And that on the one hand, we need to look more specifically at the commercial determinants, but also we need to look more specifically at the political determinants. That is literally the power constellations and the ideological positions that impact on health. And the two obviously link together quite frequently in terms of where the power is. And as you know, some foundations and some commercial entities are larger, have more money, and are possibly more powerful than some nation states. So those, I guess, are some of the challenges we face. My request to you, my plea to you would be, as you work on the Trondheim statement, to keep this in mind, to keep the truly deeply political nature of health promotion in mind, to understand how much notions also of social policy, of social solidarity, and of social challenges in a global world today interface with how we live our lives. And maybe one thing that has been the most important driver for me has been a very simple question that the leading German sociologist Ulrich Beck formulated very simply. He just said, how do we want to live? And I think that's the question we should put to ourselves. How do we want to live in the kind of society we have today? And how do we answer that question in relation both to human health and to planetary health? Thank you very much.